When I think about Jesus' instructions for reconciliation in Matthew 18, there is a sense of mediation in there, talking about taking, another member of the church alongside if it can't be worked out between two people. And the other piece of that beforehand is there is this expectation that the person, whether they are the one in the wrong or whether they are the one who is wronged, it doesn't matter. The prescription is the same. They are to take the initiative in reconciliation. And so in reconciliations that I've experienced in my own life, I know that I have often had to swallow my pride and say, I'm going to confess the piece of wrong that I have contributed to this mess within the relationship. And in particular, coming out of my teenage years toward my parents, and really had to fess up to the degree to which I had put them through turmoil, irrespective of whether I thought any of it was justified. And so there's always this sense of the initiative is on the part of the believer, of the follower of Christ. If I'm going to follow Christ, my first position, my parting words need to be, forgive them. They know not what they're doing.
Mm. And that initiative that you are talking about, it seems to me that's I don't know, we might call it like a form of risk, right? You hold out your hand and you risk having it slapped away. Mm. So there is some kind of relationship perhaps between trust and risk.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this may be pushing things in too much of a theological direction, although I mean, whatever. But it seems that there is this relationship of some kind. And, I'm not making the claim that these are two ways of saying the same thing, trust and risk, but there's a Christian philosopher, Kierkegaard, who said that there's no, without risk, there's no faith. And the greater the risk, the greater the faith. And then there's this other theologian who I admire, Paul Tillich, and he says that doubt is not opposed to faith, but it's actually the very condition that makes it possible. So, I mean, feel free to push back against any of that, but assuming that there is a relationship between these terms, faith and doubt, trust and risk, and so on, what does this mean for us as leaders when possibly thinking about leadership at a local level, about who are we investing in, who are we taking a risk on, and this sort of thing? Because I think I hear this a lot. Maybe you do too. It's like they say, well, yeah, I'd love to have leaders in my corps, but I don't have anyone who's competent or qualified. And I'm like, well, maybe you need to take a risk. I don't know. Is there something there that you guys could speak to?
Yeah, I hear it. And I think almost, if I can just be, frank about it, sometimes we use it as a cop-out. We don't want to invest time into someone because we're already thinking in our minds, oh, this person is doomed to fail before we even give them a chance. Mm-hmm. And so when we risk, we have to know that though the investment may not work out, it still does not give us an excuse to not, pour our time, our energy, our efforts into discipling someone. And so with everyone, no matter even if they're the greatest faith believer or someone who's just come to Christ, you are putting a risk into investing in that person because you really don't know their life. You don't know what they've been through. You haven't been through their walk. They don't, sometimes they may not understand where you're coming from. There's a risk in everything that you do with ministry, but the blessing is that if you put your time and effort into them and you pour into them, chances are they're going to be around for a while. They're going to undertake the ministry that you've helped them, understand that they've been called to.
Yeah. All right. I mean, does anyone have any stories about maybe like a time that somebody, you felt like someone had taken a risk on you? Like, has somebody ever placed their trust in you? Like maybe more trust than you felt you deserved at the time? How did that?
All the time, Matt. 40 years of ministry. It happened all the time. It happened when I wasn't even looking. They were trusting me and took risks with me. And I pray God that I was worthy of that through the years. I haven't been perfect in that score, but all the time that takes place. And I want to just make two other points as we go here. First of all, as a leader in the Army, I could trust people because I trusted God. Now, hear what I'm saying. The relationship is not purely A and B. It includes the presence of God in our relationships, in our holy relationships, particularly among Army leaders, local officers, corps officers, divisional leaders, territorial representatives, and certainly employees and volunteers as well. And I found that I could trust people because I trusted God. One of the early encounters I had in a territory as a territorial commander was I went to a divisional review, and these people didn't know me from Adam, and I found myself saying to them, they were going on about something, and I said to them, "Trust me, I'll work to solve that." And one of the people at the table just blew up. "Trust you? I have learned not to trust anybody who says to me, 'Trust me.'" How fabulous. I was wearing the scars of previous leaders, I guess. I don't know. But I could trust them. I could trust my team that I didn't put in place or that I did put in place because I trusted God. I want to make that real clear, that has been part of my journey. And then, I just want to make that real clear in our conversation. That's important for us to understand, that God is in the equation and that we can trust others. And then the other point I wanted to make was, if we're going to help people grow in faith, that is corps officer, whatever your role is, local officer, if they're going to grow in faith, then they need to be exposed to risk situations, just like you're saying. Levels of trust and levels of risk go. We've got to help grow in their faith by trusting God more, giving them even riskier situations. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about crazy stuff here. And nor am I talking about an exercise just to prove that they've fallen into your arms and you caught them. That's not it either. But I am talking about being bold enough to say, yeah, I think you might make a good Sunday school teacher. And I'm going to come alongside and help you in the process, but I'm going to trust you.
Yeah, I think that there's a place for wisdom, which is also a gift of God. And, to recognize that God, the Holy Spirit, is at work in other people, wherever they are, in their maturity level, in their faith. There are appropriate levels of trust that we can place in them. I just recently was listening to a podcast, Freakonomics podcast, on something to do with how to be a CEO or how do people become CEOs. And so they were interviewing all these different people. Jack Welch was one of them. And early on in Jack Welch's, he's the worked for GE for 40 years, the president or the CEO for 20 years. Early on, he literally blew the roof off of a factory because of a chemical reaction that he had control of that, went haywire. And no one died, fortunately. But he remembers that the model of leadership that that the then CEO gave to him, and said, "What did you learn from this? What are you going to do differently?" And so failure on his part, even though it was blowing the roof off of a factory, did not sign his death certificate. It was a learning experience along the way. And one of the lessons is that every good leader needs to have some failures in their background, as part of their own formation, or some level of failure. Hopefully no one dies, but some level of failure is going to be good for the formation of a leader.
Yeah, and that failure is not necessarily a betrayal of trust, but an opportunity to deepen it, right? I think somebody else said that.
And an opportunity for their leader to demonstrate trust as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Well,
we were talking about, you know, at the beginning, we were talking about people, you know, who have the illustration of metal. And when we have failures, and when we have picked ourselves up, and we have had people who have encouraged us on, that's where we become stronger. That's where we become the metal that we're talking about. And we think, oh, they saw it in me, I'll see it in them too. You know, it passes off from one to the other. I was thinking as we were talking about this that we have to, and I'm sure other people have alluded to it, we have to see people as they should be, right? In their fully redeemed state. How are we going to choose to see them? And it's through that we think, oh no, they absolutely have the capacity to do this, not because of who they are, but because of who Christ, who wants to work and partner through and save and make them full, you know. It's that which is going to draw them out and bring them to the higher level of trust and of leadership. And it's when those are risks that are worth taking. They are scary, and they're scary. But they're risks that have been taken on me, each of us that are sitting here. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that people have. And yet I look back and think, what on earth were you thinking? Like, what were you thinking? But it's made metal out of me. And so people intentionally looking to see how Jesus sees this individual, this person in their fully redeemed state.
And that just makes me think of how when we're talking about ourselves as leaders, we think of we are the one that's in charge of, at whatever level we're in charge of. We are the one that's in charge, and this decision is my responsibility, and it's my name on it. You know, that's the risk that we're taking. And I have to do what's right. And we have this well-intentioned thought of, how is this going to benefit the church? How is this going to benefit the ministry? And there's a lot that goes on into our head. So taking a risk, like all of us believe, and like Mari said, is scary. I don't think that risk is not a safe word. Obviously, there's a whole department to avoiding it, right?
We avoid risk at all costs.
So yes, risk is bad. Is it a risk? Don't do it. But when we look at each other, when we look at the people within our core, within our community, even as ourselves, God doesn't cherry pick, like you're better and you're better and you're better and you're better. But being in leadership, that's just one of the gifts that he has given us, but it's not a better gift than what anybody else has. Yeah. So it helps a lot when we look at the people around us and the people who are within our church or even just connected slightly to our core, to look at them as part of this whole, grand thing that God created and that Jesus prayed for on the cross, asking for us to be unified, for us to be together. So then it makes the risk look a little bit less scary, because like Mari said, and as I'm looking at this fantastic panel, taking myself, I don't think I'm fantastic. The rest of you,
I think you're fantastic.
Looking at this fantastic panel, like Mari said, someone took a risk on all of us. Something that might have started, we could just go all into each of our testimony and who took a risk on us that changed the trajectory of our lives, even slightly. And so when taking a risk on if someone wants to be a leader in our core, absolutely look at them as your peer. Look at them as someone who has a call in their heart, wants to do something, doesn't know if they're good at it, doesn't know what they should do, doesn't quite know where they belong. But that's what it was for me. I just felt so clearly in my heart, God is calling me to do this. What do you guys think, my beloved core officers? And they took a risk. And because of that, my life has moved towards ministry. And I've been doing that and loving it, and I've been fulfilled because of it. So taking a risk is scary. Risk is bad in the real world, out there and on the earth. But biblically, what kind of may I just be the one to say it, like, look at the risk Jesus took on all of us.
Absolutely.
He died on the cross saying, I know you will do good. I know you will believe. I know I will see you again in heaven. So absolutely. I don't know where I was going with that, but
no, that's that's good, and I think maybe that's a good place to stop.